All right, we'll get started and hopefully some others will sign in shortly.
Okay.
Okay, can you see the source sheet? Nope.
Not
Now,
yet.
now you can.
Ah,
All right,
yes.
we're in Parshat VaEtchanan, um, very rich parsha in that it
Mm.
contains several familiar passages, including the first paragraph of Kriyat Shema, the second telling or the retelling of the Aseret HaDibrot of the Ten Commandments, and it's Shabbos Nachamu. The Haftarah, of course, is Nachamu Nachamu Ami. Um, Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Ah. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Um,
Hi, Cheryl.
so um,
Hi.
there's a lot to talk about in this parsha, and I wanted to focus on something that maybe is perhaps a little bit less focused upon, but I think quite interesting. Um, so that is
Gosh.
the parsha opens with Moshe pleading fervently to God to let him enter into the land, VaEtchanan el Hashem, right? And Moshe makes his case, I guess, one more time, or one of his last times. He doesn't ever really give up on this begging.
This
Uh, but
isn't the one. What?
but he
This isn't the one for tonight.
he begins. The parsha opens with Moshe's pleading,
That's
begging
right.
God to
That's
let him
right.
enter the land.
Just
Um,
here. I'll take care
he,
of
of
it.
course, is
Please.
denied. And then there's a transition to what we said that Sefer Devarim is a series of speeches that Moshe delivers to Bnei Israel um, at the end of his life. So we have the conclusion of the first speech, which began last week, and the beginning of the second speech, which spans through chapters 17 or 18, which spans for the majority of the Sefer. And that's
Uh-huh.
the speech that focuses on the mitzvot. But in between those two speeches, we have a very brief narrative interlude. And the narrative interlude is as follows. Az Yavdil Moshe, Shalosh Arim Be'ever Hayardin, Mizrach HaShemesh. At that point, then Moshe separated three cities on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Lanus Shama Rotseach, Asher Yirtzach et Reyehu Bivli Da'at, Lo Sone Lo Mitmol Shilshom, Binas Elachad Harim Ha'el Vachai. In order for someone who kills, right? Usually we translate Rotseach as murder, but here specifically it's not murder, but for someone who kills their fellow without knowledge, right? Unintentional, and without pre-bias, without some sort of bias of hatred against the person. Um, in, in such a situation, the
Specific.
person, the perpetrator of the crime, can run to one of these cities to live. Et Betzer b'midbar be'eretz hamishor leReuveni ve'et Ramot b'Gilad la'Gadi ve'et Golan b'Bashan la'Menashi. So each of the three tribes who has a portion in the eastern side of the Jordan has one of these cities of refuge designated in their territory. Vizot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Israel. This is the Torah that Moshe placed before b'nei Israel. That line should be familiar to us, right? We say it every time we do Hagba and Shul, right? Vizot HaTorah asher sam Moshe. We point to the Torah. Okay, so the question we're going to focus on is why does the Torah tell us about this piece of information now? What's
Mm.
so
Mhm.
important about the designating of these three cities of refuge? Okay,
And why three? Why not just one?
why three? Why not just one? Okay, so there's a technical answer to that. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, why three? Why three? We'll come to that question also. Um, okay, so the Rashbam in source number 2, actually, let's see the Chizkuni first. The Chizkuni focuses on, I'm not sure that there's anything here, but it is a little bit curious that the language the Torah uses is Az Yavdil Moshe. How would we translate that literally?
Then Moshe Mavdi
Differentiated.
differentiated Lahavdalah.
Yeah, so it's
Mhm.
Havdalah, but the it's in what tense is that verb in? Yavdil.
It's the future.
It's the future tense. So it's a little bit curious. I'm actually surprised that more commentators don't pick up on this. So the Chizkuni tells us maybe there's nothing here to be so excited about. In the second line here, Al Atzmo Omer Moshe Kach, Hu Ki'ilu Ketiv Az Hivdalti, right? So he says Moshe, it's like this weird interlude between the two main speeches. So since Sefer Devarim is written by Moshe and not with the normal narrative voice of the rest of the Torah, it's Moshe acting as the narrator. So he says it in this weird format in order to just say that he's talking about himself, but it's not really part of the speech. So it's as if he wants to say Az Hivdalti. Right? We have a similar thing with the Shirat Hayam. Az Yashir Moshe, right? Also in the future tense, even though
Right.
it's describing something in the past. So on that, we've seen like the Sfat Emet and a lot of the Hasidic commentators go crazy and make really beautiful things. Az Yashir Moshe, not only is it referring to what Moshe did historically to record the events, but Az Yashir, he will sing, right? There will be future songs along similar lines. Um, but no one really picks up on that here, no one that I saw. So I'm not sure if there's any significance to that or not.
Is
But
there an issue grammatically with using the future tense to refer to past, using the past sometimes to refer to the
yeah, so
future?
that
The
is a
the lashon, the Gemara, I'm sorry, the grammatical usage in biblical Hebrew is way different
right,
from what we use the last 1,000 years,
right. So
at
we
least.
have right the normal in normal biblical grammar we have the vav hahipuch. So vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Vayomer also right. The verb is in the future tense with the yud, right? The yud in the front means the future, but the vav beforehand, biblically, just the way that the grammar worked in that time, changed it to past tense. And we have that, right? That's like a very common thing. But without the vav avipuch, we don't. It doesn't normally work that way.
That would imply a possibility that from the divine perspective, uh, in the moment of creation, everything was created at least in
Yeah,
potentio.
that's
And so, from that perspective, this will be set up, that will happen, that will occur. And when it's written down, it's an echo of the original thought
yeah. So
of the
so
event.
you could look at it that way, right? Meaning like from a philosophical perspective, the way that God, God exists beyond time. So the way that I've always heard that explained is that we are audience members in a movie theater, and we can only see history frame by frame as the movie reel progresses from one frame to the next. But God is in the projector booth, and God can look at the entire reel and see everything at one time, right? That's sort of
Rabbi?
how, yeah.
Oh, excuse me. You go finish. Which one's two?
No, that and then so meaning, yeah. So that there is something about the nature of time that might be alluded to here. Again, I'm not sure. It could just be this is normal biblical grammar, and I'm just not, I'm making something out of nothing. I'm not sure. Go ahead, Ann.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in what the Rebbe does here. He moves it into a decision that Moshe makes. The translation we have is Moses decided to designate.
Okay.
So
It's
it's
not, I'm not
plain,
sure how anyone gets that from Yavdil, but it's intentionality. Okay.
it's not a hiffil.
Right.
But it has a causative feeling about it. So
Okay.
that with that a vowel there, Yavdil,
Could be.
that that's actually let's see, isn't that a PL form? So it implies something that is strong and difficult to do, or it's because the PL has a kind of a different force about it. So I mean, it leads
Yeah,
itself
but
to
it could have been
moving
heave
his
deal.
mind,
You could have said
but
heave deal and it'd still be heave deal. No?
yeah, but it plays upon the fact that he has been turned away from going to the land. Oz, Yavdil. It's as if he has made a havdalah with that way of thinking, and now he's going to go on and he's going to decide to do something else.
Okay.
Something like that. That's
All
how
right.
I would
All right. I hear it.
type it.
Okay. The Rashbam says that it's nothing the Rashbam looks to just the question why is this mentioned here? So he says it's kind of necessary because well, let's read inside. Lama hifsik divrei Moshe shehin mechubarim yachad ze achar ze v'katav ze maaseh b'intayim. Why does it interrupt? Why does the Torah interrupt Moshe's speech to tell us about the designation of these cities? לפי שהעריך בדברים עד עכשיו, ועתה מתחיל לפרש המצוות, איך ביאר את התורה הזאת, but right, he's given one speech and he's about to begin on a very lengthy speech that spans for many, many, many chapters, many parshiot, many weeks. הוא צריך לומר בשופטים ושוטרים, שלוש ערים תבדיל לך בתוך ארצך. Later on, right, as part of Moshe's future telling of events, he has to tell them that they should designate three cities on the western side of the Jordan River. Im Yerchav, right, and right in the context there, he also says if your borders expand, then you should add three more. We'll see that passage in a second. Right? And so it wouldn't have made sense to not have mentioned these cities at some point prior. It says this is the point where it made sense to mention it. It was kind of like necessary for the narrative arc to hold together. Okay, so he says it's sort of just a necessary interlude or a necessary fact that that had to be inserted. But let's see, right? Because it's not, there's many references to the Arei Miklat, to the cities of refuge. We'll just, in Sefer Bamidbar, we have the first mention of it, right? And this is the first time that we see the three that Moshe is referring to, that he designated, right? This is the original place of Az Yavdil, when Moshe set them aside. So in Bamidbar, this was in Parshat Matot Maseh, chapter 35. We'll read from verse 9. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, דבר בני ישראל ואמרת להם, כי אתם עוברים את הירדן ארצה כנען, והקריתם לכם ערים ערי מקלט, תהיינה לכם, ונס שם הרוצח מכה נפש בשגגה. Right, God says to Moshe, you're about to cross the Jordan. You have to set aside three cities of refuge for someone who kills by accident to flee to. והיו לכם הערים למקלט מגואל ולא ימות הרוצח. It should serve as refuge from the avenger and the person who, right, we'll call them the murderer, the killer, will not be killed. Ad amdo lifnei haidal mishpat, before he's able to face a court of justice. Harim asher titnu sheish arei miklat yena lachem. You should designate 6 cities of refuge. Et shlosha arim titnu be'ever layarden. Et shlosha arim titnu be'eretz Canaan. 3 on the eastern bank side of the Jordan, and 3 in Eretz Yisrael proper. Rei Miklat Tiena, they should be cities of refuge. Livnei Israel, Lager v'Latoshav v'Tocham Tiena Sheish Harim Ha'ela Lemiklat Lanu Shama Kol Makei Nefesh V'Shkaga. They should be cities of refuge for Israel, for strangers that live among you, for any inadvertent killer to run in refuge.
Is
Okay, so
there a mitzvah requiring the establishment of an Ir Miklat in Maryland?
is there a mitzvah establishing an Ir Miklat in Maryland? Not that
Is
I am aware of.
is Aver Hayarden, the eastern bank of the Jordan, is that Eretz Yisrael?
So that's an interesting question.
And even if it isn't Eretz Yisrael, there
Yeah,
is a mitzvah to establish 3 Ari Miklot there, along with perhaps some of the 42 towns designated for the Levium. It's an
yeah,
interesting matter. Uh, there was a plan, and the plan's being modified or adapted to meet the needs of the 3 Shvatim that
right.
specifically.
Certainly, there is no modern day requirement for an Ir Miklat absent of the Sanhedrin, absent of a Beis Hamikdash. The use of refugee cities that we have um, in the news nowadays is not the same thing. There's certainly no halachic imperative for that. But as we'll see, maybe there is some relevance to us nowadays as well. Okay, we'll leave it at that and move on for the time being. Okay, and then we have one more passage later on in Sefer Devarim. Ki achrit Hashem Elokecha. Someone tell me when I need to scroll further down in the English. Et hagoyim asher Hashem Elokecha notin lecha et artzam. So when God helps you to conquer the land and defeat the nations, shalosh harim tavdil lach b'toch artzecha. You should designate 3 cities in the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha notin lecha lerishta. Tachin lecha derech v'shilalshta gevul artzecha. So they should be equidistant from one another. Vayalenu shama korotzeach, and that's where any killer can flee to. V'zed varotzeach asher yanu shama v'chai asher yaket ve'yehu bivli da'at v'lo sonelo mitmol shel shom. This is who is eligible to run to these cities, is anyone who kills someone else without intent, without knowledge, and without prior bias, as we saw previously. V'asher yavot ve'yehu b'yar lachtov eitzim v'nidcha yado b'garzen lichot eit v'nashal barzel min ha'etz. Right, it gives a very specific case of someone who's chopping wood in the forest, and the axe head dislodges from the axe handle, and it flies and it kills someone. Lest the avenger run after the murderer. Right, and because he's very angry that his relative was killed, and he would be in his rights to seek vengeance until the person gets to the city of refuge. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Therefore, I am telling you that you must designate 3 cities. And if God expands your borders as he promised your ancestors and gives you a more expansive land, we're not going to get right now into the details and specifics of what are the borders and boundaries of Israel. But if God expands, when? It's wonderful to see you, Gwen.
Hi,
Hi.
You're on mute.
Hi, Gwen.
We can't hear you. We can see your wonderful smile.
Yeah, I know it's very late. I'm sorry to just disturb you, but I just thought I'd come in at the tail end.
That's wonderful. We're
We're so happy
thrilled for you to join us.
So happy to see you indeed.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you so much. Please
Okay.
continue.
Okay, so if your borders are expanded, then you should have 3 cities, 3 additional cities of refuge, so that innocent blood not be spilled in the land. Okay, so we have these cities of refuge. And again, the question we're focusing on is, why is this what Moshe chooses to tell Bnei Israel about at this point? So there's going to be two separate but maybe related answers that I want to give. The first
And
is,
why is it three? What's significant about the number of three cities?
so it's really six, right? There's really, right, a total of 6 cities of refuge, and it's a question of why it's divided three and three, three on the eastern banks of the Jordan and three on the western side. Right, you have only 2.5 tribes on the eastern side, and yet they have, only less than a quarter of the nation. Yet they have 50% of the cities of refuge. So the Gemara says that might be because they're living in a land that is more susceptible to violence and to acts of murder. That, right, it's not really the full spiritually elevated status of Eretz Yisrael, and so there's likely to be more need for these cities of refuge there. You could take
They
that or
live
leave
in
it.
the Wild East instead of the
Yeah, the
Wild
Wild
West, but
East, the
it's the
Wild West.
Wild
Yeah,
East.
yeah. But this is source number 6 is one of my favorite passages in the Gemara. Um, it's building on a very technical point, but it's very beautiful, I think. So the Gemara asks the question, Darash Rabbi Simlai, Mai dichtiv az yavdil Moshe shalosh arim be'ever hayardin mizrach hashemesh. Why does the Torah tell us, or what's the significance of the Torah telling us that Moshe designated these 3 cities on the eastern side of the Jordan? So first it says, Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, Hazrach shemesh larotzchim. You should shine a light, shine the sun for murderers, i.e., provide them with hopes of rescue. Right? This is not a criminal murder. This is someone who, what we would call manslaughter, someone who commits unintentionally, without legal blame, causes the death of someone else. Right? So in such a situation, God's saying, Moshe, you are providing a ray of hope for these people. Okay, we can skip for a
That's
second.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
very beautiful.
Okay, so then the Gemara says, it quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, from Kohelet. My dichtiv ohev kesef lo yisba kesef, umi ohev behamon lo tevua. Right, he who loves silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. Right? We generally read that to say if someone is greedy, someone is focused on money and material gains, they can never get enough. And the Gemara reads it here as Ohev kesef lo yisba kesef, one who loves money can never get enough of money. Zeh Moshe Rabin. This refers to Moshe, and we're not reading it as Moshe is, physically, is focused on material wealth. But what? Haya yodea she'ein shalosh arim shebe'ever hayardin koltot ad shelo nivcharu shalosh ba'eretz Canaan. There's a technical problem. The problem is that, right, as we sort of alluded to in the passage from Devarim later on, source number 5, that there's an order to these cities of refuge. In order for them to be effective, first you have to designate the 3 in Eretz Yisrael proper, and then you could designate ones that are beyond the boundaries of the land. But Moshe does it in reverse. He designates the 3 on the eastern side before the Jewish people have even crossed the Jordan River. So the Gemara says there's no effect, right? There is no, what Moshe did is completely ineffective. These cities of refuge are not working as cities of refuge until the 3 in Israel are designated first. So why does Moshe do it if he knows it's not going to have any effect? Moshe knew that the 3 on the eastern side of the Jordan would not be effective until the 3 in Eretz Yisrael proper were designated. The Amar mitzvah sheba liyadai akaimenu. But nonetheless, Moshe said, if I have the opportunity to do a mitzvah or to do something that has the semblance of a mitzvah, I'm not going to pass it over. I know that eventually we need to have 3 cities on the eastern side of the Jordan, so I'm going to designate them in order that they will then be, they will be in place when the time comes.
The hold on the eastern part perhaps is weaker because it's treated as a kind of an addition, the geography, the three tribes, the cattle, and so on. And they promise, yes, we will go along and we'll be in the front of the fighting and this and that. We'll after we set up our children and wives and so on safely on the eastern bank. But by having a designation, it's creating something which is um, uh, I want to say biologically very, very integrally related to Eretz Yisrael. These are a miklat, but they do not become activated until the base are a miklat on the west
Right,
are established,
right,
and that can't happen until after the bulk of the conquest has occurred.
right. So it's a beautiful idea, and it's amplified even more in the next source in the Medrash and Devarim Rabbah. In the Hebrew, I'm about one, two, three, four, five lines from the top. Tavar acher, and the English is where I try to highlight in the blue. Ohev kasef, right? What does it mean? The one who loves money, who loves silver. Amar b'Yitzchak, misha hu ohev mitzvot. It refers to someone who loves the mitzvot. We're not talking about material love of material wealth. We're talking about mitzvot. Inoso ve'amin ha-mitzvot. Someone who loves mitzvot can never get enough mitzvot. Ketzad. How is this so? Ad motzei shtei gedolei olam, David u'Moshe v'lo saveu. There are two great illuminaries of the world, David and Moshe, who were never satisfied. What does it mean they were never satisfied? David, afal pisha amar l'kadosh baruch hu, rak ata lo tivneh et habayit hazeh. David was told by God, you will not be able to build a temple, right? Because David was a man of war, was a man who shed blood. God said, we can't have a warrior be the one to dedicate the temple to Hashem, to serve Hashem, right? So David's told, you can't build the Beis HaMikdash. But David never gave up. And David wanted to do whatever he could to help in the process. I got David Omer la'atzmo, right? Just because God said you can't build the temple, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to sit on my hands and do nothing? Ma'asa, so what did he do? Zaraz atzmo v'hitkin kol tzarchav ad shelo met. So he laid the groundwork for the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, he couldn't start piling up the stones and shaping the building, but he could clear the site. He could, right? The Medrash tells us that he helped to dig the trenches in which the blood of the sacrifices was drained. So he did whatever prep work he could do that was allowed. Right? There's a pasuk that says that David made preparations. Moshe, similarly with Moshe, God told him, you're not going to cross the Jordan River, you're not going to enter into the land of Israel. Amar Moshe, Moshe said, what am I going to do? I'm stuck here on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. At least let me designate these cities of refuge. So, right, it's saying that Moshe had a real thirst and desire to at least have some parts in moving the process forward, and this is what he did. And if we go back to the psukim that we read at the first, right, to introduce this whole thing, it ends with the beautiful idea. The pasuk that we say every time in shul when we lift up the Torah, "V'zota Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Israel." This is the Torah that Moshe gave to bnei Israel, right? So we could read it midrashically as this is the lesson that Moshe imparted. Even if you can't fully fulfill all the mitzvot, and even if there are impediments to you living a fully observant life or whatever, nonetheless, do the partial mitzvah. Do God's will, even if it's not a technical fulfillment of the mitzvah. That's the attitude that we should be having. And that's the message that we maybe are trying to impress upon each other when we raise the Torah in shul and saying this is the attitude that we should have towards Torah.
Wow.
So that's one idea. And we'll maybe come back to that. All right, any reactions or thoughts to what we've said so far? Okay, we'll move on.
One of my
Uh,
rabbis
Yep.
was used to say, "Do the best you can," and he would pause a little bit on that. Do the best that you can.
Yeah.
Okay, not in other words, not in a quick dismissive way. Well, do the best you can. No. Do the best that you can.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Good idea.
Okay, so I heard an interesting idea, and then so I heard a shear, and then I found some earlier sources that I think support what was said in the shear. I'm not sure if the person who was giving the shear is aware of the medrash or not. I should probably send them an email, just point it out to them. But the point that was made is that there's something more fundamental about the Ir Miklat in Moshe, for Moshe and Moshe's life, than this sort of lesson about commitment to mitzvot. And that is, if we go back to the earliest stages of Moshe's life, right? The first time when Moshe emerges on the scene is, right, he's saved from the decree of Paro. Paro's daughter finds him, raises him in the palace. And then in source number 8, right, we read, Vayhi b'yamim ha'im, Vayidal Moshe vayetze el echav, vayar b'sivlotam, vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav. In those days, Moshe grew. He grew up. He went to see his brothers, so he knows that he has some connection with the Hebrew slaves, and he sees an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man. He looks this way and that way. He sees that no one is looking. He strikes the Egyptian, kills him, and hides him, buries him in the sand. And the second day he goes out and he sees two Hebrews are fighting. He says to the perpetrator, why are you hating this other guy? Says, who put you in charge? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? Moshe becomes very afraid. He says, it's known, right? That the word is out. It's not a secret. Everyone knows what I did. Paro finds out, and he wants to kill Moshe. He wants to send his, unclear if Paro himself is going to do it, or he sends his police force after Moshe, but Moshe is in grave danger. Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro, vayeshev be'eretz Midyan, vayeshev ala be'er. So Moshe runs away from Paro to the land of Midyan. The claim that was made is that Moshe running away to the land of Midyan is his Ir Miklat experience. Right? That Moshe, right, he's not blameless in that he acted, right, it was totally unknown to him what he was doing when he killed the Egyptian. But we would say that this was a defensible act, that he shouldn't, it's not an act that was deserving of him being punished in a court of law. He was defending the helpless Jewish slave. And so by running to Midyan, he is living out what is supposed to happen in the Ir Miklat. And further proof of that comes from the very end, right? So, his time in Midyan ends with God's appearing to him in the burning bush, very lengthy back and forth, God telling him, I'm going to save the Jewish people. Moshe says, I'm not deserving. I don't want to do this. I don't speak well. I stutter. God eventually convinces him. And if we look at the very, very end, as Moshe returns back, what's the impetus for Moshe to return back? So we read in Shmot, right? We read, Vayilich Moshe vayashav al yeter chotno, vayomer lo elchana vashuva el achai asher b'mitzrayim, ve'ereh hodam b'chayim. Vayomer Yitro leMoshe lech l'shalom. This is what we expect. Moshe comes back from the burning bush. He tells Yitro, his father-in-law, it's been nice working for you as a shepherd, but I have to go back to my people in Egypt. That's what we expect, and that's how we always tell the story. But it's not so simple, because the next pasuk tells us, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe b'Midyan, lech shuv Mitzrayim ki metu kol anashim v'vakshim et nafshecha. God tells Moshe while he's in Midian, you can return to Egypt because everyone who wanted to kill you has died out.
Mhm.
Right? What's the rules of an Ir Miklat? How long does someone remain in the Ir Miklat if they committed an act of manslaughter?
The life of the Kohen Gadol is the
Until the
issue.
Kohen Gadol dies. They have to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies. So the people, the person in charge, right? However we understand it, but right, Moshe is told it's safe for you to go back to Egypt because the person in charge has died. So that really emphasizes that what Moshe was living at that time was in an Ir Miklat. Wasn't designated as a city of refuge, and it was a whole country, a whole region, but it was an Ir Miklat experience.
Mhm.
Okay, so this shir that I heard was again the Pardes Parsha podcast. Um, right, so the woman who was featured this week's name is Aviva Wapner. Right, so the question was posed to her, why is this the pivotal moment that Moshe reflects on as he's talking to Bnei Israel on the banks of the Jordan River? And she says as follows. She says that this moment, right, it was a chance for Moshe to choose which path his life would take. So even right at the very beginning, when he goes out to see the Hebrew slaves, um, to go and see his brothers Basivlotam, to see them suffering, to see what the slaves were experiencing, was a big choice to leave the palace and the comforts of his home, where he could have maybe continued the rest of his life as an Egyptian prince and never had anything to do with the Israelite counterparts. So that, of course, was a huge decision that he identified himself as a Hebrew and as part of the Hebrew nation. Beyond that, we have a second question, or a second reason why this was such a foundational moment and pivotal moment in Moshe's life. What would have happened if he had been punished by Paro and the Egyptians for what he did? If Moshe was punished, if Paro succeeded in killing him, if Paro's police force found Moshe, if Moshe hadn't been able to get refuge in Midian, who would have saved the Jewish people? And thirdly, what would have happened if those Israelites who saw Moshe kill the Egyptian had perhaps written him off and said, Moshe's a bad guy. He's a murderer. He can't lead us. But the fact that he's able to go and recuperate with Yitro and in Midian means that maybe he can come back and face the people with a new identity and not be known as the murderer.
Is having to support your stepfather or something. Please say that again.
So so right, so the Ir Miklat for Moshe, right, and this highlights what an Ir Miklat is going to offer in the future for the Israelite people. Number one is that even if you're not legally guilty and right deserving of whatever penalty we would give someone who murders intentionally, nonetheless you have to bear some responsibility for the actions that you caused, even if it was completely accidental. The fact that you did something that led to a loss of life is something that bears consequences and something you have to own up to, something you have to live with, right? So that's one thing. And number two is that it emphasizes that this Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, is a place of rehabilitation, is a place to give someone a new lease on life, to forge a new identity and not be known only as the killer. That's tied into having to wait this undefined period of time until the death of the Kohen Gadol. Is that it offers this new a new leadership comes to power, a new regime, and with that we can begin to relate to people in a different way, perhaps. So very interesting insights into what the Ir Miklat is. And with that, I want to share the medrash that I found that I think supports this claim. The medrash in Devarim Rabbah says as follows. Again, someone please tell me when I need to show more of the English. Ma ra'a Moshe litain nafsho al ari miklat. Why did Moshe go to such lengths to designate Ir Miklat? Why was Ir Miklat something that was so precious and so important to Moshe? Amar Rabbi Levi, Misha achal et hatafshil hu yodea ta'amo. Rabbi Levi says, whoever eats from the dish knows how it tastes. Meaning, it's saying because Moshe himself experienced the Ir Miklat, it was something that was very precious and dear to him. Right? So exactly the point that we just made, that Moshe had this Ir Miklat experience when he was able to run away to Midian. Ketzad, how is this so? When he killed the Egyptian, the next day he goes out and he finds the two Hebrews, right, who the Midrash identifies as Datan and Aviram, fighting with one another. Okay. So again, right, without the Medrash is saying that this episode in Moshe's life was his Ir Miklat experience. And then at the end of the Medrash, it says as follows. Pretty sure I have, yeah. Davar acher, az yavdil Moshe. So another understanding of the significance of Moshe then separated these cities of refuge. Amar Rabbi Ivu, Kivan Shabarach Moshe Hitchiel Omer Shira. Rabbi Ivu said, when Moshe ran away, he started to sing a song. Shene'amar Vayeshev be'eretz Midyan, Vayeshev al ha'be'er. Right, as it says, he ran to the land of Midian and he sat by the well. Ma Yisrael amru shira al ha'be'er, af Moshe amar shira al ha'be'er. Just as the Bnei Israel sang a song about the well. I think, was that our Parsha Shir this year? Was that last year, where we looked at the Shirat HaBe'er? Right, in Sefer Bamidbar, when they dig a well and they sing a song. So too, when Moshe goes to a well, he must have sang a song. Rabbi Levi, Lefishe Ra Parshat Rotzeach Hayado Bari Miklat. Rabbi Levi says the song that he sang is that he merited to have this passage of Ir Miklat attributed to him. Okay, so there's some joy for Moshe in having this passage of the Ir Miklat attributed to him. So very, very powerful, interesting connection. And then the final piece in this puzzle about why Moshe is so focused on the Ir Miklat is the host of the podcast, Tzvi Hirschfeld, is asking Aviva Wapner, in Moshe's focus on the Ir Miklat, do you think he is either intentionally or subconsciously giving the message or the idea that he is looking for a second chance, just like someone who runs to the Ir Miklat gets a second chance to be saved from the Avenger? Is Moshe looking for a second chance? And she says, yeah, that's very possible. And that if we think about what's the reason that Moshe is not able to enter the land, what was the sin that led to Moshe not being able to enter the land?
He hit the rock instead of
He hit the
talking.
rock. Vayach et hasela. He hit the rock. What did he do to run to the Ir Miklat? Vayach et hamitzri. He hit the Egyptian. It's the same verb in both instances. So maybe subconsciously Moshe is saying, just like I hit the Egyptian and I was able to get some rehabilitation, a second chance by running to the Ir Miklat, I want a second chance here to atone, to repent for the sin, for the mistake that I made, because it certainly wasn't intentional. So maybe that's part of what's going on here. And then we can add one more piece to the puzzle to bring it maybe full circle. Not only is Moshe pleading for himself that he wants the Ir Miklat to be relevant in his life and for that to be the reason why God should give in to him, but
they say that Medicare is.
Two more points back for the Gemara and Malkot. Number one, Robert already alluded to this, is that not only is it the 6 cities of refuge that serve this purpose, but there's also all the Arei HaLeviim, all the cities of where the Levites would settle, could also function as an Ir Miklat. We're not going to get into the technicalities of all that, but Moshe comes from Shevet Levi. So Moshe is saying these Ir Miklat really are my claim in Eretz Yisrael. Because as a Levi, he would have settled in one of the Arei Miklat or one of the Arei HaLevi'im, which would function as an Ir Miklat. Number one. Number two, Gemara tells us, Talmid Shegala Migalin Rabo Imo. If a student is forced, has to run to an Ir Miklat because of committing an act of manslaughter, his Rebbe, his teacher, has to be exiled with him. Shene'emar v'chai. Why? Because it says that when someone runs to the Ir Miklat, they have to be able, it's so that they can live and not be killed. Well, for a student of Torah, to live means they have to be able to study Torah. They have to have
His
a
Rebbe is
rabbi,
punished.
a
The
teacher.
Rebbe is
Right,
punished.
right. So is that a punishment for the Rebbe? Interesting question. Maybe the Rebbe, in the absence of a Kohen Gadol, bears some responsibility. Again, in some cosmic way, even if it's not an act of intentional murder, something went wrong, right? We can't ignore that something is amiss, that the act of the student led directly to the death of someone else. So, right, it is, maybe it's a punishment for the Rebbe as well in some way. Okay, Amar Zera, Mikan Shalo, okay, Amar Yochanan, Harav Shehagala, Megali Yeshivato Imo. If a teacher, if the Rebbe has to go to the Ir Miklat because the teacher's involved in its act of manslaughter, the entire yeshiva has to go with him. Because for the teacher of Torah, to not have students would be to not have a proper life. So maybe Moshe is also saying, I'm going to set up this Ir Miklat as a way to continue, even if I can't physically be there with you. I want to be associated with the Ir Miklat because I want to continue that relationship of Rebbe and students. There's something that the Ir Miklat highlights, the student-teacher relationship, the teacher-student relationship, that Moshe is able, right? We still think of Moshe as our great teacher. None of us met Moshe personally, but we're able to maintain that kesher, that connection with him. And so the reason perhaps why Moshe is so adamant on focus on Ir Miklat is number one, to teach us this beautiful, powerful lesson about what our attitude towards Torah and mitzvot should be, that even if we're not able to technically fulfill a mitzvah in its completeness, our attitude should always be, we want to do God's will, whatever that is, even if we're not going to get the mitzvah points, even if we know that there's some technical reason why what we're doing doesn't have any halachic significance. It's not only about halachic responsibility, but it's about really being able to do Ratzon Hashem, to do God's will in every situation. Thought number one. Thought number two is that Moshe is telling Bnei Yisrael that the foundational moment and experience in his life was his ability to run away to Midian and sort of recreate himself and rehabilitate himself in order to come back and, with that experience, become ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our greatest leader, that there's something very foundational about that. And thirdly, that perhaps Moshe is evoking the Ir Miklat to, in a way, enhance his prayer and his plea to God that he wants to be able to enter the land of Israel, and that he's saying, God, you've given us this concept, this idea of the Ir Miklat, so let me go, and I'll exile myself. I'll go to the Ir Miklat. I'll do whatever tshuva I have to do, but I'm not willing to give up completely on entering the land. And the last piece of this is, even if Moshe is not physically able to go, part of the message of the Ir Miklat is that his legacy and his influence remains with us through the Ir Miklat, and the insistence that the relationship between teacher and student be maintained even when the Ir Miklat has to be evoked. Questions or thoughts?
That is so beautiful. I mean, if in the cities of the Levies, one might perhaps expect that there would be someone there that could do some teaching and would
Mhm.
know how to work with people. But this, I guess, refers to a kind of a different whole concept here that maybe by the time that was written down, they didn't have that many cities of the Levies to think about. And so the Rebbonim step into that role again. And it's just an amazing commitment. It really is. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, we will leave it at that. I mentioned at the beginning when just Arthur and Anne were signed on, unfortunately, we got news today that Leah Marx's father passed away. She's been with him in Houston. A lot of logistical complications. The funeral is going to be in Dallas, and Leah will be returning to Baltimore to sit Shiva next Monday for the week, Monday through Friday. So with that said, we're going to not have Parsha Shir next week and encourage everyone to go. The Shiva Mincha Marv is going to be at 7:50 every evening. I know a lot of people are out of town, so whatever we can do to support the minyan. So we're going to not have a Parsha Shir next week and encourage everyone who's able to please go and support the minyan. As the email, I'm going to send out the email later tonight, but she'll actually be sitting Shiva in the shul, not in her house. So all the details will be sent out in a little bit, but we're going to not have Parsha Shir next week so that we can support Leah at this time. And sort of not in the same order, but this Shabbos also a lot of people are not here, myself included. Anyone that is in town is highly encouraged to come to shul on time. Bring your friends. Bring. It's gonna. We hopefully have a minyan confirmed, but not much more confirmed. So anyone that's able to be there would certainly be welcome. So with that, I will wish everyone a good night. I won't see you over Shabbos, but it should be a wonderful Shabbos wherever you are. And we will resume our Parsha Shir in 2 weeks. So,
As a Hashem.
Very good. Thank you,
yes.
Rabbi.
Okay.
Happy
Have a good night.
trails to you.
Thank you.
Have safe journeys and
Thank
best
you very
regards
much. Thank
too.
you. Thanks. Bye, Latov.
Good night, everybody.
You too.